Distrust of media is coming to a head. We're not going to forget what happened in Ohio with that supposed Trump derailment of a train. The media once again in politics trying to blame Trump for what it is incompetent in doing itself. We're looking at the poisoning of an entire city. They're saying it was brakes. They're saying it was this. I believe it could be an infrastructure sabotage. But while we're on the subject, the whole world is in the process of being taken over. It's not only China, it's in the Muslim community, and you're not paying attention. That's what this show is going to be about. You don't want to miss this broadcast. I want to talk for a moment about what actually happened there in that tragic Ohio derailment. My son, Carl, pointed out to me today that East Palestine was actually originally called Mechanicsburg, just like Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, near Camp Hill and Cumberland and Harrisburg. And they decided to change it because so many of the people there are believers. And so they decided to call East Palestine to reflect the values of this largely conservative and religiously oriented community. I don't think it's a coincidence that this tragic dump of toxic death has literally come to wipe out a community of good people, 80% of which support patriot, conservative, religious values. It's kind of like why you have to pray, folks. You've got to pray. If you knew the number of air accidents that have been missed, you only get a couple of them on the news. I fly 2 million miles. I'm on my 3rd millionth mile right now. So I am a little bit more of a statistical risk than most people. So I take an interest in air information travel. And what the woke administration is doing now is they're hiring low IQ, incompetent people to fill out quotas, meaning people that are lower in competency, in testing score, and capability, who suffer from perhaps some psychological or sexual disorientation, are moved to the front of the privileged line of hiring practice in woke corporate America. That means that you wouldn't necessarily have LASIK eye surgery done by somebody that was brought in by quotas, would you? Representing some aggrieved political class, whether they're good at what they do or not. No, you want to have the most competent person possible handling air traffic control and surgery, because these aren't social sciences. They're engineering sciences. It requires a different set of skills. Well, America is being taken over by the idiots who believe that they can impose their worldview on you. What do you think about this? Well, how would they feel if I was to dump out every single qualified engineer, MIT graduate, physicist, and medical school graduate, and put in nothing but Pentecostals that show up to my tent meetings? I'm putting all my tongue-talking Pentecostals that believe in deliverance ministry at the top of the surgical teams. Oh, you'd hear a total meltdown on the, what are you, crazy? Exactly my point. Even I don't want to impose an ideological litmus test on jobs that should be given out based upon merit and competency. Although I'd rather have a competent tongue-talking person handling my surgery. That's my own personal preference. I like to know that we can pray together before we go in. New York Times debunks. This is the New York Times. The New York Slimes, when they come out with an article, it hurt them to do it. It was painful to pull this. They had to pull teeth in the editorial review committee to come out and say, Trump had nothing to do with the Ohio derailment. Buttigieg lied. Biden lied. We have to tell him the truth. Trump had nothing to do with this accident. First person they want to blame is Donald Trump. What is wrong with America that we even allow them to get away with this kind of stupidity? No, the rail safety rule that they said Trump rolled back. I'll remind you of the story because we don't want to lose it in the news cycle. Donald Trump, he cut rail safety. In other words, here's the narrative in Washington. We need to spend money. Trump didn't spend money, and now people died. No, the problem is you're spending too much money in Washington, and that's killing us. And then your woke policies are going to wipe out the rest of us. So there's no connection between the high hazard cargo trains that need to be equipped with electronically controlled pneumatic brakes. That was the question they were dealing with. And Trump said, well, he said that, basically he said there's no correlation between those brakes and accidents right now. However, this accident in Ohio had nothing to do with brakes. I think it could be sabotage. Nobody wants to go there, but I'll go there. And so the New York Times, once again, is forced to go to confession. Trump had nothing to do with the accident in East Palestine. It's they're not quite sure. They think it was some kind of a mechanical malfunction. I don't know. They couldn't figure out what happened in the Wuhan lab. I don't know how they could figure out what happened on a train. They weren't there. They weren't there to see. But we've had these. Have you noticed the proliferation and the increase of food processing plants burning down all over the country, and the chicken farms and the chicken hatcheries burning down, and nobody's quite willing to say that there could be in all these miles of railroad intentional saboteurs that would derail. I mean, if you have increased lawlessness happening in the world, it makes sense to me that with increased lawlessness, you're going to have people that are going to be doing things like this: random acts of violence, random acts of destruction. That's why the left is suicidal. Because if you have laws, if you have culture, if you have consensus, if you have common ground, if you have an empathic connection between people, rather than this constant, advocating for the minority, imposing on the majority their personal rights and privileges to chemical castration, let's say, if you're a transgender enthusiast. This only feeds the division and alienation of relationships within society. Now, what does the Bible say? Jesus says in the last days, the love of many shall wax cold because of lawlessness. Ho! He nails it. 2,000 years. You'd almost think the guy had some foresight. Because of lawlessness, the love of many. What is love? Your willingness to have compassion and empathy and concern for others is predicated upon a certain kind of a culture where there's a bond between people that exists. And if somebody's having a hard time, you feel connected to them. That's where empathy comes in. You kind of empathically can identify with someone else's sufferings. That's where sympathy comes from. You're simpatico. You can sense something of what they're going through. But you see, where lawlessness abounds, people pull back. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You pull back from love and from connection and from support, and you pull back into survival mode. And survival, all you got to do is walk down the street in New York City. I often think about this. Christians all over the place. They could be born-again Christians, Spirit-filled Christians. You meet them in a certain context. They're convivial, they're friendly, they're hugging, they're talking, they're shaking hands, they're singing, they're joining hands in prayer, they're worshiping. But you put them on a street in New York, and everybody closes their parameters around them so as to be autonomous and watch out and protect themselves. This is purely understandable. You're literally pulling in the boundaries to protect you. You're grabbing hold of your child's hand. You're telling them don't talk to any strangers here, and you're kind of cautioning. You're managing. If someone comes up to your child to initiate a conversation, you intervene. Why? Because you're not in a safe environment. It's different if it's someplace else. So what does it mean when we're talking about the love of many waxing cold and because of lawlessness? Well, it simply means that you're going to see an increasing dissolving in culture of the structures of law, and what you're seeing is the ever increasing power of lawlessness take over. And I get a little bit frustrated, I have to tell you, and justifiably so, with the 40 million or so Christians in America who can't find it in themselves to get into agreement that the two primary vehicles outside of public opinion that shape the culture of a country like ours is litigation and legislation. Litigation is what the courts impose. Legislation is what the government imposes. PR, or public opinion, is how you persuade the masses to support said laws and said statutes. For some reason, Christians divide over political engagement, and they become kind of like mystified and sentimental about how culture is shaped. It comes down to a sustained pattern of public persuasion. That language isn't mine. It's William Wilberforce, who overturned slavery in Great Britain. As a Christian, he said you must engage in activism. You must engage in legislative pressure. You must make the argument to the conscience of the nation regarding the word of God, the truth of God, in the language the world speaks, not the language the Christian speaks. Then you can change the world. We'll be right back talking about how this works in the next segment. If you're like me, you get frustrated when you see Target and these big shop stores that are pushing their woke agenda on your children. How do you fight back? Well, you got to reorganize. Public square is what you've got to do. I want you to give your business to people that share your values, share your faith, that are patriots, that are pushing back on these big woke corporations. Go to lancewallnau.com/public square or public SQ. Download the free app so that you can shop with people in your own area. Put the money in your community in the pockets of the friends that are sharing your values. And by the way, if you've got a business, you especially need to use this app because you can put your business on the app so that other people know who you are and they can do business with you. lancewallnau.com/public square. Do it now. I want to come in now on this idea as to what's happening with the derailing of America, which is so metaphorically obvious with East Palestine, and the fact that while we don't and probably won't know the specifics of what is behind the burning down of these food processing plants, the constant threat to rail safety, we do know that woke airlines are deliberately endangering your safety because of their hiring practices of incompetent and not qualified people to meet the ideological quota, which kind of bothers me only because you got to keep praying, folks. You have to pray. East Palestine, hate to say it, if you're living near these railroad lines, you're going to have to pray. And does prayer make a difference? I'll tell you something. I got friends of mine in air traffic. I just met with a pilot recently in American Airlines. And he's saying, if you knew how many times prayer thwarted near accidents that you don't hear about, you'd understand how God is at work overtime in answer to his prayer, in answer to the prayers of his people. And so I want to let you know that prayer does work. Psalm 91 is a warfare prayer that David, that is in the Psalms of David for a reason. Now, let me transition here to another subject, which is very much related to this. And that is the way in which globalization and global governments want to take control of the United States and how the United States is willing to surrender that control. And part of this scary phenomena is coming up in the Pope. Now, I'm not a big fan of this Pope Francis. Everybody was like Lady Gaga over him early on because he came off like a rock star, waving his hand and being so friendly and inclusive. And over time began to realize from people that knew him, oh, this guy's actually a Marxist. And then he's coming out gradually eroding, the traditional Catholic values. But at least he isn't as bad as perhaps the next Pope. So you start to watch this sequence going on, and you realize, oh my gosh, you know who the man was who was supposed to be the Pope? Was this Archbishop Vigano. I don't know if you know who Archbishop Vigano is, but he would have been like from my perspective, if Trump was elected, America wouldn't be in the place it's in right now. There would not be a Russia-Ukraine war. We would not be funding the conflict. There would have been other ways of dealing with Russia, and Trump would have been able to rally together those resources, because Russia and the United States shouldn't be at odds in the first place. You don't put the bear and the dragon into a collusion against the eagle. So Vigano, this Archbishop Vigano, should have been the Pope, but there was politics that kept him out. This guy is the actual Christian, just like Trump would have been the actual great leader, a Cyrus leader for this country. He wrote a letter, open letter, warning the West that the globalists actually are behind taking out Russia and Putin. I want you to think about this. I know this is going to be incendiary, and I'm always having my producer coming out and telling me, hey, you can't say that and you can't say this because you can't put it on YouTube and it won't be it gets very frustrating because I have to pick subjects and say things that, you're not going to, if I say what you need to hear, you're never going to hear it. But I'm going to tell you anyway. Our State Department is in the business of promoting global LGBTQ rainbow flag conformity. The biggest gripe I run into as a global traveling ambassador of the kingdom of God is the leaders of nations that tell me they're forced to swallow whole our woke rainbow transgender gay ideology, fly our stupid rainbow flag on the embassies. And these Christian countries, and sometimes Muslim countries, this is why they despised us and we failed so bitterly in Afghanistan. We multiplied billions of dollars into woke education of people who are trying to resist the Taliban. How stupid can you get? That's the American government. We're dying because of a low IQ. So Vigano says, our State Department is against Putin because he isn't woke enough. He doesn't embrace their rainbow agenda. He stands for historic Christian principles in the Russian Orthodox nationalist vision of Russia. If possible, I'm going to try to put a link in there for you from AmericanMagazine.org or it's AmericaMagazine.org. Archbishop Vigano pushes conspiracy theories about Ukraine and Russia in a 10,000-word letter. This man who got sidelined by the political apparatus of the Catholic Church wrote in 2022 that the deep state forces in the United States, the European Union, and NATO are triggering a war against Russia and demonizing Putin. The United States of America and the European states must not marginalize Russia, but build an alliance with it, he wrote, not only to restart trade for the prosperity of all, but in lieu of the reconstruction of a Christian civilization, which will be the only one able to save the world from the transhuman and medical technical globalist monster. The Archbishop wrote. Do you guys have any idea what he's talking about? He's saying that the Klaus Schwab.
This portion is too hot to handle for social media. Go to lancewallnau.com/podcast to listen to the entire show.
And this brilliant Christian scholar is putting the dots together better than most Pentecostals, better than most prophets, I might add. He's saying Christian civilization is under threat by the world order of these corporations and these pharmaceutical, political, utopian, lust for power, dictators. China would love this technology in their hand. And Putin is not an enemy. He just doesn't want to go gay and transgender with American wokeness. He says it's taking down Western civilization. You're watching the dismantling, the late stage destruction of a civilization because of its ideological addiction to perversion as an expression of humanity's freedom. Instead of just the freedom of choice, you live the way you want to. No one's going to persecute you over your personal choices. But don't try to convert me and my children or put us out of business because we don't bow the knee to your perverse Baal. Oh, that's fighting words out there, but that might as well be what it is. Because this archbishop's talking about transhumanism. He's saying they're going to start to mess with the human being to produce a different kind of human being. It's not an industrial revolution. It's a new order of species they're trying to create, like Lucifer wanted to be able to come down into the human blood system and somehow mingle together. This is the story of why you read about Nephilim, and everybody's fascinated with the Nephilim and with the fallen angels, having sex with the daughters of men in the day. You can read about it. And up to the 6th chapter of Genesis, you see the angelic realm mingling with the daughters of men, producing a hybrid species of these giants. Where do you think that David ended up slaying Goliath and of Gath? Where do this unusual species come from? You trace it back, and we don't know where the link is, except that it comes from this theology and this history of the angelic realm violating its realm separation from Earth and coming into the Earth. It's like the UFOs you're looking at now. I try to veer myself and my audience only clear from the unhealthy conjecture as to what all this means. But I'll tell you what I do know it means. It means that the veil between the spirit realm and the natural is getting so paper thin and gauze-like that you could almost see through it. And you could see human beings acting like demons, almost like you look at Biden. The guy's like a robot. I'm sorry. I don't know how much of a spark of a human being is left in that carcass. And I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm saying he looks like a man who is running a program. That's the danger of selling out to the system. The system can control you. And what happens after a while is you lose your conscience and you start doing weird things. Well, anyway, Vigano calls it out here in this letter. I'd love to have you guys read it because what it leads to is this realization that Russia and the United States are on a collision course, not because Russia is the cruel, tyrannic aggressor, although you cannot excuse all of anything that Putin has done in terms of his war with the Ukraine, unless you understand how he sees this as a war with the West and its unified effort to destroy the modern nation state. We're asking God to raise up in the chaos code here. We're looking for God to raise up leaders that are such that they could get behind and support and not persecute the agenda of God's ecclesia. So the C is Cyrus rulers, the H is the house of God. We've got to get these apostolic houses on. We need each other. We need to link together. So the house is the second one. Cyrus said, build the house of God. He literally told the Jews to do it. The house of God led to an awakening. Once we start getting this moment coming along, in the book of Haggai, they awakened when they came together to build the house God wanted, a house for the nation. After that came the occupation of culture. Nehemiah came and said, we've got to take the walls. We've got the house. Rebuild the boundaries that we've lost. Retake the gates and put them back. That's the occupation. That's CHAO. Finally, sovereign states, sovereign spheres, sovereign nations. We won't be assimilated by the beast. We won't bow our knee to the World Health Organization shutting us down, or the CDC, or any party, Republican or Democrat, that again wants to rob us of our religious freedom and our rights. Digital passport, digital currency, whatever comes our way, we will retain sovereign nation status and not be part of the empire system the globalists want. They eventually become sheep nations in Matthew 25. C, Cyrus. H, the house. O, occupy. A, awakening, occupy, and then sovereign sheep nations and cities. That's the plan. It's the chaos code. You can get it. It's 100,000 bought so far. Get God's chaos code.
Thanks for listening to this Lance Wallnau broadcast. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to subscribe and share the episode. See you tomorrow.